It's the Happy Families podcast with Dr. Justin Coulson, the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now. We're Luke and Susie, a husband and wife radio team and the parents of 3 young boys. Today, we're talking about a question that's come through to the show, how to help a teenager in their friendships when they're struggling with their mental health. We're addressing a question from Emma today. She has a 15-year-old and I feel for her because I think probably knowing what's happening with mental health in Australia, this would be one of the common questions that parents are trying to figure out, how do I help my child? Emma wrote, my 15-year-old son is very anxious, depressed and fidgety. He's happy when he's with his friends, but he doesn't have many true friends. How can I enable him to pursue and make good friends without taking over?
Without taking over, do we leave that to last, or do we
Let's talk about the mental health issues first. So Emma has said that she's concerned that her son has anxiety and depression. We need to be very careful about using these words and understand whether somebody actually has a mental illness or whether they're just feeling a little bit lousy or feeling a little bit nervous and worried. Just because somebody is worried and is feeling anxious doesn't mean that they have anxiety. Just because somebody's sad and having a rough time doesn't mean that they have depression. There are some clinical criteria that need to be met over a sustained period of time for somebody to receive that diagnosis. So it's worth checking in with the GP if you don't have a diagnosis and getting a referral to a psychologist. The psychologist can have a conversation and figure out, is this somebody that's actually got depression and anxiety, or is this somebody who is just feeling lousy about life? Life's challenging and they're having some difficulties and they need some skills to equip themselves to pull themselves out. So I just wanted to address that first. When you're a teenager, sometimes life can be really hard, especially around friends. Now, the next issue that we probably need to address is the friendship issue, and then we'll talk about the taking over. Okay? Friends. Friends are oxygen when you're a teenager. You can't live without them.
No.
It's literally like saying to a teen, no more air, let's see how you go. And I had this conversation just this morning with a lady in the United States who was interviewing me for a podcast, and she said sometimes our children have friendships that are toxic or friendships that are dragging them down and making them feel worse about themselves. How do we help our children to know that they're better off being lonely than having those friends? And I said, well, in the same way that you teach them that they're better off not having air, like they would rather have some kind of a relationship. Our children are, in fact, we as humans, we're ultra social. We need to feel that we belong. We need to feel that we matter. So what I would be doing if I was Emma, and this is where we start to get into the whole, how do we inject ourselves into this teenager's life without going too far, without becoming forceful and having them push us away, is asking some careful questions. When you're around these people, do you like yourself? When you're around these people, do you feel like they're bringing out the best in you? Do you feel like you can be who you really are? Or do you feel like you have to change? Because when we've got good friends, they accept us for who we are. We feel good about ourselves and we don't feel like we need to make any adjustments. Crucial questions for helping kids to know if they've found their tribe. Now, if the answer is no, our job then becomes, how do I support you as you look for better friendships? You're looking at me so earnestly.
Well, this is such a big thing for me. I mean, we're not at that age yet. Our children are in primary school at the moment. And the friendships are quite organic in primary school. It's a very different scenario to high school, I think. But I think how much do we get involved in this process? Is this about getting them involved in social groups outside of school that has things in common?
Yeah, one of my first suggestions is let's look at the school situation. Maybe that's not going so well, but what are you interested in? Because I'm going to guarantee there'll be other people who are interested in that somewhere as well. And if you don't know, well, let's try something for a term. Does it work? Does it not work? Over time, so long as we can develop relationships in those things that we're interested in, that can become a great support. Maybe it's a church group or a sporting activity. Maybe it's, something really weird that is just your thing. I've got a friend who is into, I can't remember what they call it, but he gets dressed up in all the medieval costumes.
Cosplay.
No, it's another name.
Not cosplay. It's the reenactment of historical.
Okay.
Like it's
They put on all the armor and they run around with shields and swords
that's cool.
in fields. It's got some name, I can't remember what it is, and I kind of think that's really weird. Okay, but for him, this is his thing, and he's found an entire community as a 40-something-year-old male who loves to get dressed up and play these games in the fields, like, they're medieval warriors. Your son or your daughter will find their thing if we can help them to look around. So that's one thing that I'd say.
The thing that I struggle with is there's a time in our children's development where we get so stressed about making sure that they have every opportunity to learn this and to learn that, and eventually the advice comes to go, let them be kids and they have time they'll grow into some of that stuff. Between that and teaching them these skills, and when can we stop assuming that it will just sort itself out, in a sense? So if we don't address it, they won't develop these skills as an adult, and then we've let them down. I find the pressure on both sides pretty intense.
It's really tricky because, and as parents, we get rewarded for being a little bit overprotective. We get rewarded for helicoptering. Let's say your child forgets their lunchbox and they're at school with no food. You take that lunchbox to the school and you feel like you're a good mum or a good dad because you've done that. And so we kind of get rewarded for stepping in. We look like we're being good parents. But what we're actually doing, I mean, it's fine, do that once or twice. But if this is a repeated habit, we need our children to learn how to be responsible, which requires some other conversations down the track. And maybe one day we say, I wish that I could. But today, I'm sorry, you're going to be really hungry at 3 o'clock when I pick you up or when you catch the bus home.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting we be hardcore about this, but we've got to let them actually experience failure and mistakes so that they can grow. We get stronger by going through hard things. So I would say to Emma, he's going to really struggle with this. Your job is to say, how can I support you? How can I help you? And then let him figure it out. If you step in and start saying, don't be friends with that person will become forbidden fruit. He'll probably gravitate towards them. Yep. If he's feeling lonely and not making any friends, you can always have a conversation. Let's talk about what you're doing in your relationships. Let's consider how you are with them. Or you can just book in a conversation with a psychologist, because sometimes coming from mum, it doesn't work at all. But I think just your job as a parent, especially with teenagers, but at any age, is really, how can I help? I'm here to support, but you've got to do this on your own. And if you can't do it on your own, let's go and get you the help that you need.
I guess underpinning all of that, the thought in my head, Justin, is that we as parents need to see our children for who they actually are and not for who we want them to be.
Right.
So that the interests that we're pointing them towards are their interests, not what we want them to love.
They need to know that they're okay. You've got to be able to look at your son and say, I know you're having a hard time with friends right now, but you need to know you're okay. Are you the finished product? No. Are you perfect? No. But you are just fine. And as you grow, you'll get better and better, as we all do. But I accept you. You're worthy. You do belong. You do matter. And other people will see that as you start to believe that about yourself. And I'm the first one to tell you, you're okay. I know you feel like a failure. We all do. But even if you're failing, you're okay because you're trying. Failure means I'm trying. So keep trying and keep failing. You're okay.
So good. Dr. Justin Coulson,
I feel like the process of the whole thing, we answered the last part of the question of the without stepping in, without taking over. Just naturally, all those steps just give us all the tools we need. In theory, now we've got to go and execute.
Yeah, and I know we're out of time, but just quickly, you will fail as a parent. I have parents say to me all the time, I try to say it the way you say it when I'm listening to what you teach. And I get into the situation with my child and it just goes pear-shaped, like it just flops everywhere and nothing works. And my response to that is, of course, because when you try anything new, your children are going to think it's weird and you're not going to know how to react. And you will fail. It's a guarantee. What matters is that you're okay, you tried, and try again. Because the more you practice it, the better you'll get. I've been practicing this for 20 years now and I still get it wrong.
I can imagine one parent hearing Justin going, right, okay, going up to their teenager and going, I'm here to help. How can I help? And the teenager says, go away. I don't like you. Leave me alone. Slams the door. And they go,
I'm not listening to him anymore.
I don't have the next line.
I have another question.
I recently launched my book, Misconnection, the book about teenage girls. And Jessica Rowe hosted the event and she was just so generous and gracious and wonderful. But her opening remark was, I finished reading the book and in there Justin talks about how we need to connect with our children and make mornings really special. And I decided to do it. I looked at the line that was in the book. I walked into my daughter's bedroom. I sat on the bed. It was 10 minutes before she should wake up in the morning. I gave her a big hug and I said, I'm so glad to have you in my life. You're just so wonderful. She said her 13-year-old daughter looked at her and said, "Go away." Just like, oh no, what do I do?
Gets you in the feels.
I'm like, my advice is clearly working. That's good, all right.
Nailed it. Nailed it. Dr. Justin Coulson, our guest, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
If you've enjoyed the podcast, we'd love for you to get onto iTunes and leave a rating and review.
Like this one that came from Setter MJD, who said, "Excellent advice for a young dad. I only came across the podcast last week, but haven't stopped listening since. It's helped validate a number of ideas and beliefs of mine and challenged me on others."
So leave a rating and review, but if you'd like Justin to speak at your school or organisation, all you need to do is visit happyfamilies.com.au.